broadcast. My name is Jamie Lowe and I'm broadcasting to you via HAPS, the Network of Now social media platform where you can find out all about what is going on in the world from journalists all over the place. It's a great place to go to get an update on what's going on literally across the world. There are people from all corners of the globe contributing to HAPS. I'm contributing to HAPS today from Bristol, United Kingdom. And today in the UK, we had a public address from Boris Johnson, the first one in a while. He spoke to us at 4 p.m. today with an update on the figures of coronavirus infections and how the government is approaching them. Hello to everyone that's watching, Pablo and Dean, who's watching from Watertown. Welcome to my broadcast, guys. Great to have you here this Sunday evening. Quite a sunny Sunday. It's Tuesday, isn't it? Regardless of what day it is, it's a very sunny day here in Bristol, and the sort of day where you might want to get together with friends, but from Monday your friendship group will have to shrink a little bit because Boris Johnson is bringing in some new rules to curb this increase in coronavirus infection. Dolly says, I'm in lockdown now due to second wave. Hello to Chris Newsham from Marbella in Spain. What a lovely place to be at this time of year. So today we heard from Boris Johnson at 4 p.m. He spoke to the public because we've been seeing in the press recently reports of a dramatic increase in coronavirus infections. So in the past 24 hours here, 24 hours has seen 2,659 cases of coronavirus across the UK. So that's the fourth day running where we've seen an increase of 2,000 of or above. Now, we had someone in the comments there, Dolly, mentioning that they are in lockdown because of a second wave. Well, that is what Boris Johnson is trying to avoid, according to his announcement today. He's trying to avoid another national lockdown by bringing in a new rule. So a rule which he called the rule of six. He did mention in his address today that the advice and rules and how they're enforced has been confusing and complicated. I would absolutely agree with Boris Johnson's reading of that. So this is his attempt to simplify it and simplify it in a way that addresses that dramatic increase that we've been seeing in the past few days concerning coronavirus cases. Now, this rule is the rule of six. Now, what that essentially means as gatherings now, most gatherings, apart from some which are exempt, and I'll get to them in just a few minutes, now can only consist of 6 people. Now, 6 people, that is both indoors and outdoors, and this can actually now be enforced by police forces across the United Kingdom. So that means if you have 7 people turn up to a barbecue, that's inclusive of the people that you live with. I'll get to some of the exemptions in a second, but essentially if 7 people come to your barbecue or come round to play Scrabble on a Sunday afternoon, then the police can knock on the door, disperse you, fine you, or even arrest you if they so choose. Which brings up the question of Christmas. Now, we had hoped right at the start of the pandemic that we would be back to, business as usual by the time we got to Christmas, but this calls that into question. Now, for example, on my Christmas dinner table, a quick head count on the top of my head, 5, 7, 10, about 11 people around my dinner table, my Christmas dinner table, which means that's going to be difficult if this rule is still in place for my family come December. Some comments from Power Ang, who says Halloween is banned, Thanksgiving is cancelled, Christmas is cancelled. I wouldn't say cancelled, but definitely a festive celebration like we've never seen before, definitely on a smaller scale. And for large families like mine, that's going to be, quite impactful, especially with Christmas. It's a time when we all come together, when we want to be around the same dinner table. And I wonder if families will just build the fine, the price of the fine, which I'm unsure as to how much that will be, into the costs of Christmas, because I'm not sure that it would be more than I would be willing to pay to have, a full family Christmas. But let me know your thoughts on the rule of six. How do you take it? How do you read it? What does that what are the impacts on your family potentially as we approach a season of celebration? Comment there talking about Halloween just around the corner next month. Halloween typically, from my experience is, at my age, 20 something, I still go out and celebrate Halloween. I still go to haunted houses and scare parks and things like that. Be really interested to see if they're allowed to go ahead. At the minute, I doubt that they will. So, and that obviously has more impacts on business, how the people, the events space, who generally have a lot to do around Halloween, how they're gonna react to all of this. We've been hearing this week Andrew Lloyd Webber, of course, the very famous musical theatre composer, talking about how the arts industry is almost past the point of recovery, and that just is falling in line with the rest of that. So someone says there, Dolly says you could be just having Christmas dinner with your household only, but for my family, my grandparents join us on Christmas Day, and I'd hate to think of my grandparents sat around their dinner table with just each other when it comes to Christmas Day. So that would be a really uncomfortable Christmas, I think, because personally, my family builds our Christmas around tradition, and the tradition is that we're all together. That is just the crux of it. That is just the core of how my family celebrates Christmas, and I would really, really, really resent doing that over Zoom. I really would, because it's more than just being together. It's the playing of games. It's the making my grandma's cocktails at 11 o'clock in the morning. It's that part of Christmas which now I'm older, is the most important part. It's not about the presents for me anymore. It's about who I'm with. And if Boris Johnson is making that difficult for me, then although it is obviously part of the government's 5-pillar plan to combat coronavirus, that is not what I want to be hearing. Obviously, we aren't taking all of these restrictions in the best possible way, and that's just my 2 cents on it. But this rule of 6 does not apply to worship groups. So places of worship will be exempt as long as they're COVID secure. Weddings are still allowed to go ahead. That obviously has been a real nail biter for a lot of families in this particular time, with last minute changes to how many people are allowed to gather in one room. So COVID secure weddings are still allowed to go ahead with a 30-person maximum. Gyms, restaurants and shops, that doesn't apply as long as COVID measures are in place. But as well as this rule of 6, there's been a lot of attention on how the government is approaching testing. Now, testing is obviously a massive part of the fight against coronavirus. The WHO has been literally snipping at the British government's heels. Hello to Paul tuning in from Miami. The testing subject has been massive in the UK recently. So the Prime Minister wants to ramp up testing, but there's been a few problems. The infrastructure doesn't seem to be holding up that well. The Director of Test and Trace this week apologised, a heartfelt apology, because people weren't able to get a test. So that was Sarah Jane Marsh, who is the deputy to Dido Harding. And she was talking about the fact that the problems aren't in the testing centres, that it was in the labs instead, which is not what we wanted to see when we had epidemiologists and other scientific experts coming out this week talking about how the cases were rising, how it's a problem, and how we need to combat it, largely with a good, strong, solid way to test and trace. Now, I'm going to tell you about my experience of test and trace today. So I went for a coffee with a friend. I went to a high street coffee shop because not many independents were open around where we went today. And there was a guy standing outside telling us to sign up to the test and trace program. But I wanted to test. Now, everywhere that I've been so far, I must add, I've followed the rules and I've gone through the test and trace procedure, that's been, advised to do and it is set out for me. But today, because I knew I was going to be talking about this, I wanted to test, the sort of strength of it. And it relies 100% on the person, the customer, approaching it with good faith and completing the procedure themselves. So other than someone standing outside asking us to firstly wear a mask upon entry and then complete the track and trace procedure, it was a QR code that I took a picture of and then could follow through. Other than that, there was no sort of incentive or imperative to actually go through and complete the process. And as an experiment, I must add, I didn't do it, and there were no repercussions. So that again, it worries me slightly if the onus is on so much the general public who are approaching coronavirus restrictions, COVID secure measures, and this track and trace system in varying levels of seriousness. I just think there's too many holes for this to fall through. Now, in terms of the labs, I mentioned there were a few problems in labs. So Sarah J. Marsh tweeted this week a heartfelt apology for the fact that people couldn't get coronavirus testing because she said there were problems in labs. A new lab is going to be open in Loughborough in the next 2 weeks. So that should hopefully, address that issue that we've been seeing in the laboratories. But people have been struggling to actually get to the testing centres. Now, when I got a coronavirus test, was able to get to a test less than 10 miles away. I had to sit in the car queue for hours and hours and hours. Rock Boy says, second wave is coming, Jamie. Well, we're seeing a dramatic increase here in the UK. Those figures, which I mentioned earlier, so 2,659 cases of coronavirus reported in the UK in the past 24 hours. And that's the fourth day that we've seen over 2,000 cases registered, which is obviously a worrying statistic, especially as we are approaching flu season. Myself as a type 1 diabetic, I will very soon be invited along to a common flu vaccine, not a COVID-19 vaccine. Those don't exist yet. But going back to testing, people are being when you go onto the testing system, the government website, and request a test, you can either get a home test, which ran out this week. There was a day when people weren't able to get a test, or you're asked to drive a ridiculous distance. Now, if you're ill, you've got severe COVID symptoms, you might not be able to take that round trip. Some people I've heard on some talk radio stations that I listen to talking about journeys of around 70, 100 plus miles just to get a COVID-19 test. And if you're ill, that's a very unattractive prospect. Rockboy says, has the school year started in the UK? Yes. So schools were back from in England, approximately the 1st to the 2nd of September, in Scotland, the last week of August, I believe. So schools are well and truly back in session. Universities are starting their semesters as well too at the start of September. So that obviously has major implications, especially as we are already seeing such a dramatic rise in coronavirus infections over the past few days. So with the mixing of people in schools, colleges, universities, that is only set to increase. Just because you asked that question, I'm going to jump forward a little bit. We might get back to testing in a few minutes and talk about the fact that younger people are, I hate to say it, but well, Matt Hancock said that the young people are responsible for the biggest increase in coronavirus cases. I would hate to put all the blame onto young people, being one myself, but we are seeing the largest increase in the age group 20 to 29. The time period between the 17th and the 30th of August, 3,995 cases were reported in that period, 17th to the 30th of August, so the final sort of few days in August, and that is the largest increase. That's the largest age group by far. The second largest was 30 to 39. We saw 2,560 cases during that same time period. So we are seeing the biggest increase between the age group 20 to 29. Itzy Hansen says, hey Jamie, do you think there is a sense that people are just bored of the virus and stop taking it seriously, therefore making it last longer? Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. I think that has a lot to do with it, especially because of the time period that we're in, when schools, colleges and universities are returning. I remember my first few days at university, I met hundreds of people. I spoke to hundreds of people. I came in close contact with thousands of people at bars and clubs and that sort of stuff. I'm just slightly. Oh, hello. Connection. If you just hello, who are just joining. Sorry about that. Just switching on to cellular connection. They're having a few issues with my Wi-Fi. My Wi-Fi has been absolutely terrible over the last few days. Not something a content creator like myself likes to deal with, but we press on, we push forward, and we keep bringing you the news. So back to what Itzy was saying. Hey, Jamie, do you think there's a sense that people are bored of the virus and stop taking it seriously? Yes, Rock Boys, thanks for pointing that out. A few tech issues here from my home newsroom in Bristol, United Kingdom. But back to the news. Itzy, you are absolutely right there. I think even myself, it's harder and harder to approach these COVID secure measures with 100% effort. I found a mask really difficult to wear today. I was walking around the town centre. I was chatting to a friend when we were walking through what's it called? It's not a supermarket. It was a shopping mall. That's what I was at today, and it was really difficult actually to wear a face mask. And the hand sanitizer makes my hands really dry. So yeah, it's getting really difficult for me, and I can only imagine what it must be like heading to university during a time when your whole life is controlled by COVID secure measures. It must be the most frustrating thing. And honestly, I think it's going to be really tough for universities and the government to get students to adhere to all these COVID secure measures. Freshers Week is just, it's a magical time, and I just think students will absolutely want their Freshers Week to run as normally as possible, and whether that means that some of them will be having sort of clandestine gatherings of more than 6 people and flouting the rules quite severely, I think that's something that we just got to expect, and the universities have got to be ready, but ready to approach them in a way that isn't, so litigious. I would hate to see, the COVID generation, as I've heard it termed, be, really severely told off to be, dealt some really, really difficult hands, as they already have been, and further dealt some really difficult hands in the terms of, if they do break a few rules, I think we have to expect it, and I think we have to be ready to deal with that in a very understanding way, even though obviously it's wrong, the rules are there. I just think having been a student and having not had any disruptions to my party lifestyle, I can only imagine what that must be like to now have lots of disruption to your party lifestyle. Rock Boy says, I hate talking through the mask, James. Me too. I really, really hate it. It was just today when the sort of breath was coming back at you. But, I did what was required of me. I kept the mask on and I did my bit. But it's getting really hard to stick to it. You're right, Itzy. Rock Boy says cool and clandestine parties. Not in this case. Not in this case. We're seeing a lot of influencers in the States, in LA, come into quite a lot of trouble for, lots of parties. And I think we've seen a lot of influencers be threatened, have we, by local government in LA, that their power and their water would be shut off if they continue to party. Visits by police I've seen that were actually documented on vlogs. And if we just put that case study onto young people here in the UK, I think they're going to party regardless. So that's something that we'll have to deal with. So we are going to be seeing people in larger groups in different areas. You walk through a street, you walk through a busy high street, it is impossible to stay 2 meters away from anybody. So it's not always our fault, is it? It's not always because we haven't taken every step that these increases are happening. We have to also consider that this is a result of the opening up of the economy. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for getting back to normal. I'm all for embracing the new normal and saving the economy, saving the sectors of industry that have been so poorly hit throughout the pandemic and the lockdown. But I do worry that the government is using young people as a bit of a scapegoat here. So I mentioned the figures. We saw today in the press briefing, Sir Patrick Vallance talking about, the young people on a graph. He says, I think the young people were the orange line, and they were way higher than the rest of the age groups. But, it's not all young people's fault. Of course, we're seeing some illegal raves, but we are too seeing older people flouting the rules also. But maybe in book groups and garden parties and that sort of thing, not the illegal raves that we've been seeing in the news previously. But we have seen the government encourage people to get back out there, to get back spending, to get eating in restaurants and going to offices. The Eat Out to Help Out scheme, for example, was a huge example of that. I remember the first day that the Eat to Help Out scheme was sort of in operation, I tried to go to Wagamama's and I couldn't go to Wagamama's because everybody else had the same idea to go to Wagamama's, and the queue was just massive and there was no social distancing going on in the queue. Yes, people were wearing masks, most of them were wearing masks, but if you go to a popular chain pub, Wetherspoons, here in the UK, you're not allowed to stand at the bar, but the tables are very close to each other and people talk loudly, and people, when they get drunk, they get a bit rowdy. You're not 2 meters away from everyone at all times. So I think the government has to accept that this isn't just because young people are flouting the rules. This is also because there has been an encouragement for young people, as well as everyone else, to get back to the office, to go out and enjoy restaurants again, to get back spending money in the economy. Agreed, we've opened up prematurely here in the US. I would hate for us to close down. I really would. Like I mentioned a lot in my broadcasts, I'm not a politician, I'm not an epidemiologist, I don't have the answers, but I would really hate for us to go backwards. So this is actually quite a worrying piece of news out of the UK. Obviously, we are hearing that Boris Johnson is doing everything he can to avoid a second lockdown, but that to me feels very much like a warning. That to me feels like if this increase in coronavirus cases can't be gotten under control, and soon, we could be seeing more lockdown restrictions coming back into the UK and England. Now, what we're seeing a lot of, just picking up something that I want to talk to you guys about, is the local lockdowns that we are seeing. So instead of national lockdowns, lockdown restrictions are being put on certain areas of the country that are seeing quite high coronavirus increases. Now, the highest, the worst affected place, forgive me, there was, as we've heard this week, is Bolton. Now, we're seeing tighter coronavirus restrictions in Bolton, for example, curtailing a nightlife and only allowing bars and restaurants to do takeaways. So there's actually now a curfew. So between 10 at night and 5 in the morning, hospitality venues must be closed to customers. And that is what we're seeing in various areas of the country. So I just imagine, so when I was trying to sort of understand that and understand the implications of local lockdowns, it got me to thinking, well, if most of the UK is under a local lockdown, then we are essentially in another national lockdown. I understand the method of the government here, but if we're seeing increases in coronavirus cases, I think essentially at some point most of the UK will be under some form of local lockdown. The Skynet says, what's this about? So this is about today's announcement, today's address from Boris Johnson to the public here in the United Kingdom about some new coronavirus restrictions, a very worrying increase in coronavirus cases, 2,659 cases reported in the UK. That's the fourth day that we've seen over 2,000 cases. Borg1 007, great username, says we need Brexit now. There are some obvious implications on Brexit. We heard in the news this week about how Boris was prepared to break international rules, international law, and lots of concern that he will be prepared to walk away from the negotiation table concerning a trade deal. So I might save that for another day. I might wait to see how that all plays out before I give my opinion on the Brexit scenario. But we are going through a crazy time right now, aren't we? So from Monday, the rule of six will restrict gatherings, social gatherings, indoors and outdoors, to 6 people. Now, this doesn't affect family bubble, support bubbles, which are larger than that. So, for example, if we take my support bubble into account, so my family, there are 6 people most days living in my family's house, so I would make 7, but that's okay. That still would I'm just going to read some comments that are coming in. We should weld bards onto the homes of those infected. I don't think people need more excuse to drink during this lockdown. That's definitely my experience anyway. Atticus says you have to win over the youth as a person of power. They are the ones who will shape the future economy. Absolutely. Definitely with you on that. But we are seeing a lot of people blame young people for this rise in coronavirus cases. So just to recap before I hop off this broadcast, a massive increase in coronavirus cases over the last few days here in the UK. 2,659 cases reported in the past 24 hours. A large portion of that in young people, and we are obviously seeing universities back in action this week, so we are obviously going to be watching these numbers carefully to see how universities affect that. I've mentioned a lot of problems in the government's approach to testing. Eric Stamp says hello from Danville. Hello Eric, good to have you here. So that is a sense of what's going on in the UK right now. It's going to be one to watch. It's going to be one to take heed of. Cabin fever, family and drinking, not a good mix. Absolutely cabin fever. I'm with you on that. It's been great for me today to get out and meet a friend for a coffee, COVID secure coffee at that. So lots to look at and lots to pay attention to. Will the government be able to fix the testing situation? Will everyone who needs one be able to get a COVID-19 test too? Will the young people continue to be scapegoated over this increase in coronavirus cases? And will people adhere to the rule of six, that new law, which can be enforced by police, that comes in on Monday? I'll be back updating you on all of this over the next coming weeks and months. Be sure to follow me on Haps for more updates on what's going on in the UK. I talk about all things, not just coronavirus and political subjects. I talk about showbiz, and I also talk about the latest news in the diabetic world. I have type 1 diabetes. I posted a news update in terms of type 1 diabetes news to my Haps account today, so check that out if that's your thing. But other than that, thank you so much for joining me this evening on Haps. If you are watching on another platform, Haps is a brand new social media network for people interested in what's going on in the world. You yourself can become a Haps contributor. It's really easy. Head to the Haps app on the App Store on your device, log yourself in, and you too can broadcast talking about the news where you are. Rich T says bye. Lovely stuff. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. I'm going to hop off and have my dinner now. That's all from me, Jamie Lowe, here